Hey everybody, it's Ben here, and today I want to show you how to make some custom vinyl graphics for your car. So right next to me I have a Silhouette Cameo vinyl cutter. This is a pretty cool machine. It's about the size and shape of an inkjet printer, only instead of printing, it has essentially a razor knife on a carriage. It moves materials in and out, it slides back and forth, and it can cut basically any kind of shape you want out of vinyl. It also cuts paper and a lot of other materials, craft foam even, but it's really ideally suited for adhesive-backed vinyl. So just for example, you can cut any kind of a shape that you want out of this material. Now, I already recently built a holder for a vinyl roll. I've got that right here. It's more or less kind of like a paper towel holder, but I'm going to be making some really big graphics, so I'm going to use this to handle the vinyl for me. And one of the reasons why is typically you're a little limited in the size of the materials that you can cut on a machine like this. Normally, you use a cutting mat. The one that comes with this machine is a 12-inch by 12-inch. There's also a 12-inch by 24-inch available. Basically, you stick the material on here and then feed it into the machine. Now I want to do some big graphics, so you can cut with this machine without the cutting mat. You do need to make sure that you line up your material very nice and straight, and it helps if you have some way to manage that material, which is why I built this little roller holder right here for it. Now, the type of graphics that I'm talking about today are going to be very large, very custom graphics. If you just wanted to cut something like a bumper sticker, or maybe just your company name or logo to stick on the door of your car, you can do that with some smaller graphics. Just do them in the software that comes with the Cameo. But what I'm planning on doing some very large graphics, and the reason why is actually based on a collectible model that's available of my car. Believe it or not, cow spots. Now, I happen to be in Wisconsin. I drive a Mitsubishi iMiEV as my daily driver, and I found a collectible car. This is based on the Japanese version, and it is the car covered in cow spots. So I'm going to make cow spots for my car. So to do this, obviously, we're going to need the vinyl material. I already had some black handy. You can purchase this off Amazon, eBay, sign making, mail order places. That's what I did. I did find that if you order nice big rolls, you get a pretty good discount compared to buying smaller, shorter pieces. Then of course, just some other things we'll need, your typical stuff, scissors, an X-Acto knife, and then for actually applying the graphics, the two main things that we're actually going to use are a spray bottle of soapy water and a squeegee. And for doing some custom lettering where we want all the little pieces of the letters staying together, we're going to be using some transfer paper. Transfer paper is essentially masking tape, but it's a big roll of it, and it lets us grab all the vinyl, hold it together, and then apply it to the car. So stick around to the end of the video, and when we're all done, we can see how close I get to my custom graphics lining up with the model. Now, one of the other reasons why I'm here out in the garage is because this machine has the ability to create images from a little USB drive. That's a really nice feature because where my computer is in my home office, I actually don't have much room there, and to make these big vinyl graphics, I'm going to need some more space. That's why we're set up on this folding table here in my garage, is just for that space. So I'll create my graphics files, I'll save them to this USB drive, pop them into our cutting machine right here. And then when we're at that point, I can just do the cutting based on the little touch screen right here, selecting the file and cutting it. So one of the first things that we need to do is have a photograph of the car, and it should be a nice square-on photograph, no distortion, not high angle or low angle, nice and square from the side. If you're using a smartphone, you might need to zoom in a little bit so you don't get that wide angle distortion, but just a nice square-on photograph. The other thing is we need some sort of reference point in the image to be able to create our graphics to scale. So for example, on the side view of my car, there's not really any particular thing that I can have a good measurement of. So what instead I can do is I can take some of my vinyl, which is 12 inches wide, I'll cut it 12 inches long, that way I have a 12-inch square, just stick it on the side of the car. That way I have a reference, and when I take the photo, no matter how many pixels it is, I know exactly what 12 inches is on the car, and from there, I can figure out all the other measurements in that photograph. Likewise, on the back of the car, I have the license plate. In the United States, license plates are 6 inches by 12 inches, so that's a nice reference point for scale right there as well. On the hood of the car, I might want to, again, put a 12-inch square just to use as a reference for scale. Once we have a nice clean photo, we'll go inside to the computer, start working on our custom graphics. So now on the computer, the first thing we need to do is bring our image into some image editing software. In this case, I'm using Photoshop, but you could use any raster or paint program. I just happen to be using this because it's what I've got, and it has a lot of nice tools in it, but we're mostly going to be doing some resizing here because what we need to do is we need our image to be to scale. We need our photograph to have an actual relationship to the size of the real car in the real world. So I've already brought this image in and I cropped it down a little bit, just got rid of some of the background. If your image is on a little bit of an angle, you might need to rotate it a little bit. Here it looks pretty good. That square lines up pretty good with some lines I can draw in here. And what we can actually do now is let's take a look at our image size to start. So I go up to image size, and our image here, we are at 72 pixels per inch, and we're at about 2,500 pixels wide. Kind of the important part, if we look at document size, width is a little bit less than 36 inches. Now I know this car happens to be more than 3 feet long, so our image is smaller than what we need it to be compared to the real world. So to establish that relationship, we're going to use this 12-inch square, and what I can do here is zoom in a bit. So we'll just get a little closer to this. And then what I can do is I'm just going to draw some lines in here. It just makes it a little bit easier to measure things in Photoshop. And I'm going to use this measuring tool here and just measure between these two lines. And right up here, it gives me a measurement in length, 3.162 inches. And I'm going to mark that down. And we know that 3.162 inches needs to be 12 inches. And actually, if I zoom back out, we can see across the top of the screen here, 0 inches, 12 inches, all the way up to 35 inches here or so. So what we can do is just a little bit of basic math. I'm going to use the calculator, and I'm going to say 12 inches divided by our measurement across here, 3.162 equals, and we get 3.79 and on and so forth. But what we can do now is look back at our image size in Photoshop image size, and that width, 5,552 pixels. What we can do is go to the calculator, and this multiplier number that we came up with, we're going to hit times, and then that pixel width, 2552, and we get 9,685 point something. We'll just round to the nearest pixel, so that'll be 9,685 pixels. So what I can do is in our image size over here, I'm going to resize the image. I'm going to make it roughly 3 or 4 times larger by setting our width to that 9,685 pixels. And as I do that, the software is automatically going to make the height match because we've got our aspect ratio lock turned on. The document size is also getting bigger because we're not changing our resolution, but we're increasing our pixels, so everything's getting bigger. And when I hit OK on here, might take a second because that is a pretty large resolution image there. And now if we take a look across the top, wow, we're going all the way up past 130 inches wide. And yeah, taking a look at this image, yeah, that should represent something in the range of 10, 11, 12 feet. So now if we go back to our 12-inch square, zoom in on this, and measure it again, look at that. our length equals exactly 12 inches. So now there's this very exact sense of scale between our photo and the real world. So anything I do on this image, I know the size. I mean, I could even do something like know what size wheels I have. I could go out and I could measure the rims, and I know, oh, look at that rim. That is, it's about 15.5 inches wide, and that's absolutely true. So we can start working on our cow spots, and they will be absolutely to scale. So now that we have our image to scale, the next thing we want to do is match up our images. We want to bring in our cow spots and line them up with this car. Frankly, taking a really good photo of a little tiny Matchbox car is a little bit difficult, but one thing that was nice is I did find online an image of the car, and it's got a nice side view, front view, and rear view, and this actually comes from the official vinyl graphics that were available from this car. They were available through an official partner of Mitsubishi, and I have seen photos of the real-world Hello Kitty car and some of these other ones here, but never the cow car, as far as I know, and nobody ever actually had the official vinyl graphics done of the cow car, and that's kind of part of the fun of doing this, is I get to be the first one. So if we take a look here at this image, first of all, we're not going to need the entire thing, we just need the side view. So I'm just going to start off by selecting just the side view portion of it. I'm going to copy it and then paste it into my document over here. And the first thing we see is, boy, is it small. And the other thing is it's facing the wrong direction. So what I can do here is I'll perform a transform command on this, and we will set the width to -100%, and that flips it. And then the other thing I can do here is I'll hit Command T for our transform, and I'll just scale this image up, making sure not to distort it. Now it's kind of low res, and it looks super low res while you're scaling, but I'm just going to get it close, and then hit Enter to scale it. And we can see that's more or less the car, except I can't see my real world car back behind my graphic here. So what I'm going to do is over on the right here, I'm going to select my mode, and I'm going to switch it to darken. And what that does is it basically makes all the light areas of the image disappear. So we've still got the car, but it's only just the dark parts. So it's kind of a nice form of transparency, but we have some things like the shadow down here, for example. So I could just select that shadow and delete it. Just makes it a little bit easier to work with the image here. I can always turn this layer on and off to see it as well. So what I want to do now, though, is just move this image around and get it as closely lined up as I can. Any key points on the vehicle, for example, lug nuts, that's a good point to line up. The other thing that we can see pretty nice and clear in our image here is the line between the front and the back door and the outlines of the doors themselves. So I'm going to use those, and I'm going to scale and probably rotate the image until I can get those just the way I want them. Right now I can tell the rotation between the two is off a little. If I just look at the tires, the one from the graphic is down here. So I'm going to do a transform, and I'm going to rotate it a little bit. See if I can get that closer. Something about like that in there. And then I'm going to see if I can scale it. I'm going to go by the edges of the doors here. And I'm just going to keep reworking this image until I get it really exactly where I want it. Now, when I actually did this, I put in a little bit more time and effort than what I'm going to do right now, just because I don't want this to be an hour-long video. But let's just say right there is where we want it. We want the cow spots to line up with the edge of the doors. We want these door edges to line up. So I'll just do it like that. And that's what our car looks like, pretty much lining up. Now, the other thing is we're just trying to make graphics of the cow spots, so we really don't need anything outside of that. So we can get rid of everything else. Pretty much just, select the tires and things along those lines and just plain get rid of them. In fact, I also don't need the roof line of the car, for example, so I can go through until I get rid of all of those components. The other thing is I decided I do not like the green in here, and so I'm going to get rid of that as well. Pretty easy, since it's more or less just black and white. What I can do is use black and white, use my paintbrush tool, and I can simply paint over the green anywhere it is on the white. And likewise for the black, and I can just paint that out. So what I'll do is I'll basically do some touch-up, make sure I've got those nice black cow spots, my custom graphics, but without any of this green in here. And basically I'm just going to keep working that. I'm just going to get rid of everything other than the cow spots. Let's just skip to where I've already got those cow spots pretty much done. One other thing I do want to show you though is that we've got this seam in the door, and I measured this cow spot. This is the biggest one, and it's actually larger than 12 inches no matter how I rotate it, so I'm not going to be able to cut that on my CNC vinyl cutter in one piece. But what I can do is, since it's on a split on the door, it's really going to be two pieces anyways. So what I can do is I'll take my eraser tool and I'll bring it down to some sort of appropriate size, and I'm just going to follow where the split is going to be on the door and just erase away as needed. And it's got a little bit of a curve to it, so I'm following the curve of that door. So once I've got that out, I've got everything else to just the spots. When I'm all done, it's going to look something about like this. And if I want to get rid of some of this dirty white, I can certainly do that as well. But at this point, now that I've got just the spots and I've got just the car, we can see what it's pre-visualization. We can see what the car is going to look like. And actually, we still have that black spot on there. So what I could do is we could take that, select it, and then use our paint bucket tool. Make sure we have the right layer selected. Take our paint bucket tool, clean it up, or if we wanted to get really fancy, we could even do a gradient so it looks like the car. Basically, I just painted in that black square, and the reason why is so that we can see what those cow spots are going to look like. So basically, this is what the finished car should look like when we're all done. That's what it looks like right now. That's what it'll look like with our vinyl graphics applied. So now we have our cow spots. This is really what the finished project is going to look like, but we just need the spots at this point. So I'm going to turn off the other layers. There's the spots by themselves, and I can even put them over a white background, for example. And when I do, you can see how kind of a dirty white or light gray a lot of the areas around the spots are. So I'd probably do a little bit more cleanup before saving this. The other thing I can do now too is I don't need all this extra room on the sides, and I certainly could just crop the entire image down to something a little bit smaller. Or if I wanted to reduce the file size at this point, I could change the image size, but I don't want to just drop my pixels here. What I'll do is I'll change the resolution, because that will change the numbers of pixels, but still keep that inch size the same. So now what I'll do is I can save the spots, and I'll save them as either a BMP or a PNG. Do a file save as, and I'll give it a name like spots only. And I'm going to save this as a PNG format. So now we're going to move on to converting our images to vectors, and vectors are shapes. Rasters are graphics, X and Y of pixels, they're photographs, but vectors are all about shapes, and that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be cutting out shapes, and to do that, we're going to use two programs, Adobe Illustrator, and then also the Silhouette Studio software. So Silhouette Studio is the software that comes with the CNC cutter, and it's the interface between the cutter and your computer. It has some nice features in it. If you want to do something basic like make a bumper sticker, you can just type in and have the machine cut out the material. Works great. But it's maybe a little too simple in some cases. For example, if I open our image of our cow spots and bring them in, what's interesting here is this represents a 12-inch by 12-inch cut area, and our cow spots are totally the wrong size. So unfortunately, some programs like this don't always bring in your images actually at the correct size. So what I would definitely make sure to do is back in Photoshop, just noting the actual correct image size in inches, width, and height. And then that way, in the software, you can make sure to correctly scale them. And then once correctly scaled, you can use the image trace feature. So up here, we'll open the trace window and we get some options. We're going to select the trace area. I'm just going to draw around the cow spots and hit trace. And what you can see now is we've just created outlines, just the vectors, just the shapes of the cow spots, and we don't need this image anymore. Now again, this isn't sized correctly, but what we could do after that then is actually move the spots around individually, get them all to fit in place, and then cut them out. But perhaps a better way to go is actually in Adobe Illustrator. The main reason why is Illustrator, more than anything, gives us a lot more tools, a lot more flexibility. Again, this is vector software, so it's not going to ask us how many pixels or dots per inch. Instead, it's just looking for a height and a width for a new document. 81 by 31 is big enough for the side of the car. And what I'm going to do here is go up to File, Place, and that brings a raster image into Illustrator. And we're not going to work on that raster, but what we're going to do is trace it. So with the image selected, we get this image trace feature that comes up. And I think this gives you a lot more flexibility. You get a lot more control. So for example, under View, we can see the tracing result, but we can see it with outlines. We can compare it to the original image. So for example, our original image wasn't very good. It was very low resolution, a little jaggedy. So we can see if our cut lines match up very nice, or maybe they're a little off. Right here it looks a little pointy compared to the original cow spot. But let's just say we're happy with how it is. We can hit Expand. And what we've now done is we've made that tracing, that outline. I'm going to go up to View and go to the Outline View. And now we can select any of our shapes. We can see how many points they have. We can do a lot of different things with them. If I go back to the preview mode, if I pick any individual spot, I can move it around. I can make adjustments to it. Let's take a look at this one over here, because it's got kind of a weird little pointy corner on it. So what I can do is I can use this direct select tool, select this, and you know what, we can't see it great, so I'm going to go back to the this outline view, and this corner sticks out a little oddly far. So with that direct select tool, I can just pick that one point, I can move it around, I can adjust the curves, pretty much anything I want to do I can do right there. So that's kind of the big deal, is with a program like Adobe Illustrator, it gives you so much more flexibility, gives you a lot more to work with. What else I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select all these spots, and I am going to turn off any fill, and I'm going to turn off any stroke. So now we're just seeing just the exact shapes of the spots here. However, if nothing's selected, you can't see them because there's nothing to see. Again, switching back and forth between that outline and preview is always kind of a nice feature in the software. I'll just go back to the outline view here. So we've got our cow spots. And again, remember that back in Silhouette Studio, it's not very good about bringing things in at the correct size. So what I can do is in Adobe Illustrator, select all of our spots here. You can see they're all selected, and this bounding box around the outside of them, it actually tells us right up here its width and its height. So what I can do is I can note these values so that if it does get brought in wrong into Silhouette Studio, I can just simply scale it back up from there. So of course, now what I would do is I would save this file, and the other thing I can do is I can export. Down here in Export, I will send out a file as an AutoCAD interchange file, a DXF. And what's nice about that is DXF files are used for a lot of things. They're used for a lot of CNC machines, like laser cutters, for example. If I wanted to laser cut these shapes instead of vinyl cut them, a DXF file will work on pretty much any laser cutter, whereas that Cameo Silhouette Studio, that's only going to work with that specific machine, that specific vinyl cutter. So I can save this as a DXF file. I'm going to mark this as my cut file. DXF. And I'll call it cow spots cut file. And just save that out. In Silhouette Studio, I can now open that DXF file. And unfortunately, we can see that's not to scale. This is a 12-inch wide area, and these things are tiny. So what I'll have to do is zoom out, and then what I can do is I can scale these up to the correct size. And now I can actually take them and move around individually because I don't need any extra material being wasted. I'm not trying to pin the relationship of one spot to another right now. What I need to do is just get them all to fit on the roll. And my roll of vinyl is only 12 inches wide, but it's a roll, so I can make it as long as I want. So up here in my page settings, I can go to height. Let's just make this something like 60 inches. So now I have a much longer area to work with. The spots are kind of left to right sideways. So I'm going to put this in the landscape position, just kind of matches my brain a little better. And I can start moving these shapes around and just fit them all on here. Whatever I have to do to make these all fit. Ideally, I want to waste as little space as I can. And that might include, for example, maybe I have to rotate. Maybe I just rotate some of these spots to make them fit a little better. So as we can see, I get a lot less space wasted in there. Some of them too, like this big one, that's not going to fit. But if I rotate it, look at that. I get that to fit exactly in there. So what I'm going to do is make all of these spots fit onto my 12-inch wide roll. And actually, this is getting pretty long. I don't necessarily want to cut this all at once because cutting a very long banner, potentially, if it doesn't cut perfect, I've just wasted, a couple of feet worth of material and the time and effort of doing that. So when I actually do this, what I'm going to do is break it into 3 files. This is actually going to be the biggest one with 5 spots on it. The other ones are going to be just a little bit smaller. And then what I need to do is go up to File, Save As, and I'm going to save to hard drive, but I'll actually save it to a USB flash drive or jump drive, thumb drive, and then I'll walk out to the garage, plug that into the Silhouette Cameo cutter. The touchscreen interface works pretty well. It is a little on the basic side. You might want to keep your files clean just so you don't have to scroll through too much menu. But basically, I just have to pull up the file, and there's a little preview right at the top so I can make sure I'm using the right one. I double check that and then hit send. After that, the machine starts the cutting process. It pulls the material back and forth. Here I'm supporting the roll of vinyl on that roll holder and just making sure that it has enough slack that it can move the material in and out, and it cuts the shapes out. Once done, I just hit the unload button, pull the material out, and cut it to length. At that point, all the shapes are cut. Now what I might do is just use a scissors to break out some of the individual larger spots and then peel away the excess material. Always making sure not to let it stick to itself, because the adhesive backed vinyl is very sticky, and so do kind of big, nice long pulls to make sure that the vinyl doesn't come back and stick on itself. That's a good way to make a mess. To actually apply it, I use a spray bottle with a little soapy water in there, and I wet the car down first. Then I peeled off the vinyl graphic and stuck it on there. Now the reason why I'm using the spray bottle is that the adhesive on this material is actually very strong. It'll stick on contact instantly, so it's very hard to reposition. And then it also gets air bubbles stuck in there as well. The soapy water allows the material to slide around and be repositioned a little bit as needed, and it also makes it a lot easier to get those air bubbles out. So all I have to do is use a squeegee and squeegee out the air bubbles and water, and it really sticks on there quite well. After getting the water out, then all I had to do was just use a towel and wipe away any of the excess water. But that was really it. It's a pretty straightforward process, just making sure to take your time and do it right. And that's what the passenger side looks like, all finished, complete with cow spots. Now in this case, the image on both sides of the car, it's symmetrical. It's mirror images. It's exactly the same, except it's flip-flopped. So since I've already laid out the cow spots in the computer software, all I have to do is flip the image and then resave it, and then I'll have all the cow spots for the other side of the car. One mistake to avoid is to make sure that the upper left corner is lined up properly, because if it's not, the material can get away from you. It can go all cockeyed, and suddenly you ruin a good cut. So I always made sure that I had my material in a nice straight line coming off the roller, and that I would line it up with that aqua blue mark on the left and get the material up and under that very first roller. As long as everything was straight and I followed that mark and got under the roller, everything cut very, very well. So here, this is the cut for the spots on the back of the car. I'm pulling away the extra material, again being very careful not to let it fall back and touch itself. It really doesn't come unstuck if you let that happen, so I'm trying to do a nice big straight clean pull to get that material completely out of the way of the actual spots that I'll be using. So on the back of the car and the sides and the front, I always had sort of a little reference material. I had a little printout just to remind me of what spot went where, so I made sure to get it exactly right. Again, just spraying with a little bit of water and sticking the vinyl graphic on, and then squeegeeing out the air bubbles and the water. I also occasionally checked the model car itself just for confirmation, just to make sure that everything was looking good and lining up the way I intended it to. This one spot actually had to go behind the license plate, so I took one of the license plate bolts out to tuck it back in there. And here we are. The back of the car is done. Now on the front of the car, my daughter Sophie decided she was going to help me, so it took a little bit longer, and then the neighbor girl came over and decided she was going to help out too. But the front of the car ended up looking pretty nice. After I got the cow spots done, the last thing I wanted to do was add a little bit of text. I wanted some sort of kind of a bumper sticker or something, because I knew people would have questions about my car, so I wanted to set up a web page where they could go to find out more. So I just laid this out very traditionally in the software, just typed it up right with the letters on the screen, cut that out. Of course, after the cutting, we have to peel away the excess material, including whatever's in the middle of a zero, for example, or a capital P. Get all that extra material out of the way. I find that a X-Acto knife or a seam ripper are both good tools for getting some of the small pieces of material off. After that, we just used some of the transfer paper, tore off a piece of this, ran it right over the vinyl, stuck it down, gently peeled it up to transfer the vinyl decals. How's that? Go ahead. Keep going. You're doing good. Nice. Looks good.
Whoa!
So now that the car has cow spots on it, let's compare it to the actual model and see how close we got. So I'm really happy with how the cow spots turned out. Now maybe that's not your thing, but I didn't make this video to teach you how to make cow spots, but rather to do your very own custom to scale lettering for your car. I'd love to see what you come up with, whether that's racing numbers or pinstripes or lightning bolts down the side, whatever you have. Please comment, give me some links, let me know what you're working on. I'd absolutely love to see it. And until next time, stay charged up.